I am Interrogator Acolyte, Vidan Kale, Ordo Hereticus, clearance level Obsidian. This record is sealed to Omega Oblivion, for the eyes of no one save the throne. If you are hearing this and are not the one who ordered it, you have already erred beyond redemption. I begin with the only fact that matters. The Shrine Moon of Arkenza 9 speaks before it is spoken to. Our auger arrays detected Vox signals timestamped 6 minutes ahead of their transmission. No warp echo, no astropathic bleed. A simple impossibility, pure causality defied. This alone warranted the voyage, though it was not the reason given. The Silent Sisterhood summoned me. They do not summon anyone. The black ship Vigilant Mercy slid through the outer veil of the Damocles Marches 3 days ago, its hull a cathedral of iron and vacuum. Even inside the ship, silence reigns where they walk. Their presence presses like a cold blade against the mind, a reminder of every unspoken thought. They escorted me from the moment I boarded, 12 warriors in obsidian armor, trimmed with bone-white sigils. None addressed me, none needed to. Their null auras erased words before they formed. Domina Pronatus Erithsan, commander of this cadre, met me in the observation sanctum as we approached Arkenza 9th. She is tall even for one of her order, helmet off, skin the color of winter ash. Her eyes carried the stillness of a dead star. She handed me a data slate, etched with sigils of warding, and spoke without sound. Lips forming shapes my mind interpreted as meaning. Record everything. Speak nothing of its true name. Below us the moon hung in the void like a clot of dried blood. Clouds of iron oxide stormed across a fractured crust. Thin lightning crawled through the ash atmosphere, though no storms registered on the Auspex. Every pass of the scanning beams returned telemetry wrapped in static that resembled a human heartbeat. The Sisters' crew moved with ritual precision. Grev stabilizers were shut down at Cyan's gesture, and we drifted nearer on momentum alone. A sister at the helm signed a sequence I recognized from ancient litanies of sealing. A prayer of approach to holy things, or cursed ones. Then came the voice. It began as a tremor in the hull, a vibration below the threshold of hearing. I felt it in my teeth before I understood it was sound. The ship itself spoke, not through Vox, not through the metal, but as if the void had decided to pronounce a single syllable. It was my name, Kale. Every lumen dimmed. The sisters did not move, their visors reflecting the faint red glow rising from the moon. My breath quickened, despite the cold discipline drilled into every acolyte of the Inquisition. My own name delivered from a world I had never touched. Hours before any signal should have reached us. I sought reassurance in machinery. I turned to the auger panel, but the runes flickered and rearranged into high Gothic letters that spelled the same impossible word, Kale. When I blinked, they were gone. I demanded confirmation from the bridge crew, forgetting their vow of silence. They did not answer. Domina San merely inclined her head, as though the event were anticipated. Her null aura deepened until my ears rang. Minutes stretched. Data spilled across my slate in red script. Chronological anomalies, gravitational readings fluctuating between 0.9 and 1.6, standard, atmospheric pressure climbing though our sensors reported no change. The Vigilant Mercy's cherub servitors wept crimson lubricant from cracked porcelain faces. I recited the catechism of the Iron Soul under my breath. The words steadied me, though each syllable felt like pushing against water. At Mark 19 of the litany, the moon flared with a silent pulse of scarlet light. No energy spike registered. Visual only, yet the ship's hull temperature dropped 9 degrees in a breath. Frost feathered the inside of the observation viewport. Domina San gestured, a simple downward motion. Descent. The sisters moved as one, their boots striking the deck with a rhythm that synchronized with the phantom heartbeat in the telemetry. Their silence devoured the faint hum of the engines. I followed, drawn despite every rational objection. As we entered the shuttle bay, the ship itself seemed to lean closer to the moon. No thrusters fired, yet we drifted exactly into launch position. I felt the subtle tug of altered gravity, as though the world below was already claiming us. The assault lander awaited, blacker than void, its plating etched with hexagrammic wards glowing faintly red. My Auspex detected no power signature, still its engines hummed with a resonance older than any machine. Inside the lander, the sisters formed a circle around me. Their armor exhaled faint incense, copper and myrrh. I felt like a heretic intruding on a sacrament. We launched without command, the docking clamps released of their own accord, or perhaps at the moon's unseen invitation. The ship fell silent behind us, a cathedral vanishing into infinite dark. Below, Arkansas 9 filled the viewport. Its surface was a shifting tapestry of ash dunes and fissures that glowed faintly from within. Lightning crawled across the horizon in shapes too deliberate to be natural. Concentric sigils that formed and reformed faster than thought. I tried to record everything. My slate vibrated as if alive. Lines of Banquet code appeared across the display, none of them transmitted by me. Each line ended the same way. The lander shuddered as we breached the upper atmosphere. Winds screamed, but no sound entered the cabin. Outside, the sky burned a dark crimson, and the lightning slowed until each bolt hung in place like frozen arteries of light. I forced myself to breathe, to catalogue. Air density exceeded imperial norms, gravity read heavier than calculations allowed. Yet descent was effortless, as if unseen hands bore us downward. Domina San placed a gauntleted hand on my shoulder. The touch was light but absolute, like the weight of an entire creed. She leaned close enough that her breath, if she breathed, would have touched my ear. Her lips moved, no sound emerged, yet I understood the meaning as clearly as if the Emperor himself had spoken. The banquet begins when you set foot upon the ash. A final tremor passed through the lander. The moon's surface rushed upward, an endless expanse of black dust veined with dim red luminescence. Then came the last impossibility of this first encounter. Through the hull plating, through the roar of atmosphere, the moon whispered again, louder than before. A single word stretched into eternity. Kael. I could not deny it. The shrine moon knew my name, and it was calling me home. The ashes swallowed our landing struts with a sound like muffled applause, though the sisters' nullfield allowed no echo to linger. The ramp hissed open on its own command, releasing a breath of air that tasted of rust and cold incense. I stepped down into gravity that felt heavier than any calibration, my boots sinking deeper than the dust's depth should allow. Each motion required deliberate effort, as if unseen hands pressed me toward the moon's heart. The silent sisters descended in perfect formation, 12 figures of black and bone gliding across the wasteland. They left no footprints. The storm that had raged across the surface from orbit now lay frozen, clouds suspended in a sky the color of congealed wine. Lightning filaments hung motionless, their crimson glow illuminating an infinite plain of soot and fractured obsidian. I tasted copper with every breath, the tang of old blood hidden beneath the air's metallic bite. Our first kilometer stretched endless. Every step was accompanied by the faint thrum of the moon's pulse, a rhythm that quickened when I faltered. My Auspex registered gravitational variance fluctuating by the heartbeat, though it could not identify a source. I thought of the Emperor's scripture that speaks of stones made holy by sacrifice. Here, perhaps, stone had been sanctified by something older and less forgiving. The sisters advanced without pause. They moved as a single organism, every pivot and stride echoing a choreography I could not perceive. The null auras they projected smothered stray thoughts before they formed, leaving me adrift in an oppressive quiet. Only my own breath broke the silence. It sounded too loud, as if broadcast to the void. We approached a series of low ridges where black dunes folded like frozen waves. In the troughs lay perfect circles scorched into the ash, each 3 meters across and rimmed with dried crimson. I crouched to inspect one, the dust collapsing under my weight with an unexpected warmth. My Auspex confirmed the material was blood, human origin, desiccated yet still faintly warm. No corpses, no bones, only the residue of countless offerings. Domina Erith-san raised her hand. The sisters halted, as one. I froze. She tilted her helm toward the ground, and every visor followed. I listened. Nothing, only the heartbeat of the moon and the slow rasp of my own lungs. Then I felt it, a single beat, not mine, not planetary, a human heartbeat beneath the soil, slow, deliberate. It reverberated through the soles of my boots, rising from fathoms of stone and dust. I swallowed hard, tasting iron. My Auspex needle swung wildly before stabilizing at 0, as if the device refused to admit what it sensed. I whispered a catechism under my breath, but the words broke apart in the air like brittle glass. Sian turned her gaze upon me. Through her visor I saw no eyes, only the reflection of that frozen sky. She traced a pattern in the air with 2 fingers, a gesture older than any imperial blessing. My chest tightened, and an unbidden memory surfaced. A heartbeat in my mother's arms, long buried beneath decades of war. The sisters resumed their march, flowing around the blood circles without disturbing a grain of dust. I followed, though each step cost will. The phantom heartbeat continued beneath us, slow and patient. A kilometer farther, the terrain shifted. Jagged basalt outcrops rose like the ribs of a buried colossus. Between them opened a narrow canyon, walls slick with a crimson sheen that caught the hanging lightning's glow. The sisters entered without hesitation. Inside, the air warmed abruptly, carrying a scent of copper and incense so thick I nearly gagged. My Auspex displayed impossible barometric spikes, pressure increasing though no wind stirred. The canyon walls were carved with sigils I recognized from fragments of pre-imperial cults, spirals nested within spirals, angles that defied Euclidean sanity. When I turned away, the patterns rearranged themselves, forming brief glimpses of faces that vanished when I looked directly. The further we advanced, the louder the subterranean heartbeat became. It merged with my own until I could not tell which was which. My vision narrowed to a crimson haze. Only the sisters' silent cadence kept me tethered. We reached a plateau where the canyon widened into a vast plain of polished obsidian. Across it lay a procession of standing stones, each towering 10 meters and etched with the same impossible geometry. Their surfaces shimmered as though wet, though my gauntlet found them dry and cold. I activated my vox to report, forgetting again the futility of words here. Static erupted, resolving into a whisper of my own voice repeating a single phrase backward. I snapped the link closed. Domina San stopped at the center of the stone circle. She raised her arms slightly, palms outward, and the sisters fanned into a ring around her. No order was given, yet each warrior moved with flawless unity. Their silent presence pressed against my mind until I thought my skull might fracture. The heartbeat beneath the earth quickened. Dust rose from the ground in spiraling columns, forming shapes that almost resembled letters of high Gothic before collapsing. I knelt, instinctively, overwhelmed by a gravity of meaning I could not name. The plateau vibrated. From the far horizon, a low rumble gathered. Not thunder, but something older, stone grinding against the memory of creation. Then silence. Total. Even my own breathing ceased for a breathless instant. A single sister stepped forward from the ring. She knelt and pressed a gauntleted hand to the obsidian floor. Crimson light spilled from the contact point, tracing thin lines outward, until the entire circle glowed like molten glass. The light climbed the standing stones, etching each rune in living fire. I felt the pressure of a gaze, though no eyes watched. The frozen lightning overhead flared brilliant red, illuminating every carved spiral, until the canyon walls seemed to pulse like living flesh. San turned her helm toward me. Through the visor, a faint reflection of my own face stared back, pale and drawn. She made a single gesture, a downward motion, sharp and absolute, commanding me to approach. I stepped forward. The heat of the glowing floor seeped through my boots, not painful but intimate, as though the moon itself sought to taste my presence. Beneath the surface, the heartbeat thundered, now perfectly matched to mine. I reached the circle's center. The sisters closed their ranks, 12 silent sentinels, forming a living wall. San extended her hand, palm open. A thin trail of blood, not hers, not mine, rose from the stone and hovered above her gauntlet. Weightless, it pulsed once, twice, in time with that subterranean heart. Before I could speak, the blood coalesced into a sphere and burst soundlessly, misting the air with a scent of ancient iron. The ground trembled. Far below, something vast shifted, and the heartbeat skipped a single beat. A pause that felt like a held breath before revelation. Then the canyon echoed with a soundless word, one that bypassed hearing and carved itself directly into my thoughts. Kale. The sisters did not flinch. Their silence was complete, their faces unreadable. Only I trembled, knowing the moon itself had called my name again, and that the summons had only just begun. The ascent from the blood-lit plateau was neither climb nor descent, but a passage through something that did not obey direction. I followed the silent sisters as they advanced into a narrow fissure that opened like a wound in the canyon wall. The air beyond was warmer, damp with a copper tang that clung to my tongue. My auspex displayed contradictory readings, pressure at twice standard, oxygen at half, temperature oscillating between freezing and fevered heat in the span of each heartbeat. I silenced the device, unwilling to watch the numbers convulse. Inside, darkness absorbed the lumen beams. Even the suspended lightning outside failed to pierce the entrance. Only the faint red glow that seeped from the rock itself guided us forward, outlining the sisters in silhouettes that flickered like candle flames. Each step produced a resonance underfoot, a low vibration that settled into my bones, aligning my pulse with the buried heart of this moon. The passage widened into a chamber of basalt polished to mirror smoothness. Here the impossible began in earnest. Murals covered the walls, vast mosaics of gold and dried crimson, depicting saints and martyrs in scenes of rapture and agony. At first I recognized fragments of imperial iconography, the emperor enthroned, his angels triumphant, but when I blinked the figures shifted, faces stretched, halos bled outward, and the emperor's eyes became hollow voids. I looked again, and they were statues once more, cold and reverent, as though nothing had changed. The silent sisters moved in unison to the center of the chamber, forming a wide circle. Their armor exhaled faint incense, an acrid sweetness that mixed with the metallic air. Domina Erith San raised her hand, and the others knelt. I remained standing, unable to look away from the murals. One figure at the far end caught my attention, a woman cloaked in red, her mouth sewn shut with fine wire. The thread gleamed wetly, as if freshly applied. Her eyes, a deep garnet, seemed to follow me. I turned to confirm what I knew would not be there. Yet she remained, head inclined, lips bound. When I blinked again, the mural portrayed only a faceless angel with wings of fractured obsidian. My heart raced. I whispered a litany of protection, but the words came out reversed, each syllable unmaking the next. The floor trembled. From hidden vents, a rush of heated air surged upward, carrying the scent of iron and myrrh. Beads of crimson moisture formed along the walls, running downward in perfect parallel lines like scripted letters. They collected at the center of the chamber, tracing a geometric pattern, an 8-pointed star that pulsed once, then subsided. The sisters did not move. San approached me, her visor reflecting the shifting murals. She extended a gauntleted hand, palm outward. Across the chamber, the faint crimson seeped from the stone and lifted into the air, a mist drawn toward her gesture. It swirled around me, weightless, tasting of copper and incense. I felt it press against my skin without touch, a silent inquiry. A sudden vibration made me stagger. My vox bead hissed to life though I had given no command. Through the static I heard my own voice reciting coordinates in a monotone I did not recognize. The numbers repeated 3 times, then fell silent. I ripped the bead from my ear. The sisters began a slow, synchronized movement, each raising her hands to trace a sigil across the chest plate. The gesture resembled the sign of the Aquila but inverted, wings folded inward. At the moment their hands met, a soundless pressure filled the chamber, as if all air had been removed. My lungs burned. Then one sister broke the circle. She approached me, face uncovered. Her skin was marble pale, flawless, but where her mouth should have been lay a lattice of fine rosary wire sewn directly through flesh and bone. No blood seeped from the wounds. The wire pulsed faintly with red light. She raised her right hand and drew the same sigil across my chest, the tip of her armored finger leaving a smear of warm crimson that burned through my tunic. Pain lanced outward, not sharp but absolute, like a note struck in the center of my soul. My breath froze. I saw for an instant the entire chamber awash in blood. the murals screaming without sound. The sisters' faces all turned toward me, eyes like molten iron. Then it was gone. The sister stepped back into formation. The circle reformed. The chamber returned to stillness, though the crimson mark on my chest throbbed with my heartbeat. I felt as if something vast and patient had tasted me and chosen to wait. I forced myself to move, to catalogue. The auspex revived of its own accord, runes cascading across the display. Each line ended with a single word, K. The murals shifted again. The woman with the sewn mouth reappeared, closer this time, her garnet eyes gleaming. Behind her the Emperor's throne cracked, releasing a river of dark light that swallowed stars. I blinked and the image dissolved into cold stone. Domina San inclined her head toward a rear archway, a gesture both invitation and command. The sisters rose in perfect unison and turned toward the opening. Beyond lay a stairwell descending into blackness so absolute it seemed to devour the dim red glow. I hesitated. The mark on my chest pulsed, stronger, aligning perfectly with the subterranean heartbeat that had followed us since landing. The chamber exhaled a gust of warm, iron-scented air, carrying with it a single word not heard but known. Down. I followed. The stairwell twisted downward in impossible geometry, each step resonating like the toll of a funeral bell. The light from the chamber behind us faded, swallowed whole by the darkness ahead, yet the sisters moved without pause, their armor whispering against the stone, their null auras quenching every stray thought. Halfway down I risked a glance back. The entrance was gone. Only endless black stretched where we had come. My stomach turned as if gravity itself had inverted. The mark burned hotter. I gripped the rail, slick and warm like living flesh, and pressed onward. The heartbeat below grew louder, closer, as though the very moon anticipated our arrival. When at last, the stair opened onto a vast corridor, a faint vibration trembled through the floor. From the darkness ahead came a sound both distant and intimate, the slow, deliberate echo of my name, Kale. The sisters did not react. Their silence swallowed the word, but it lived inside me, carved into marrow and memory. I tightened my grip on the auspex, though the screen now displayed only a single pulsing glyph, an 8-pointed star glowing the color of fresh blood. We advanced into the unseen depths, and I knew that whatever waited would not allow return. The corridor narrowed until the walls brushed my shoulders, slick with a sheen that was not stone. Each step echoed as if striking hollow bone. The silent sisters pressed onward without hesitation, their null auras stripping the air of sound and thought. My auspex had long since gone black, but the 8-pointed glyph burned inside my mind, pulsing in rhythm with the subterranean heartbeat that guided us. The passage opened abruptly into a cavern, vast enough to swallow a cathedral. Stalactites hung like the fangs of a buried predator, dripping luminous crimson onto a lake so black it reflected nothing. The surface quivered though no wind stirred. Across the water a single structure rose, a spire of obsidian ribs coiled around a core of golden light that flickered like a dying sun. It was both impossibly distant and unreachably near, a paradox of space that made my stomach lurch. The sisters formed a half-circle at the lake's edge. Domina San stepped forward and extended her hand. At her gesture the black water hardened, a path of glassy crimson unfurling toward the spire. Without a word they began to cross. I followed, each step ringing like a funeral chime. Beneath the transparent surface I glimpsed movement, shadows shaped like memories, faces from campaigns long finished, comrades lost to void and flame. Their eyes tracked me with mournful accusation before sinking back into the abyss. Midway across, the path shuddered. The heartbeat grew thunderous, vibrating through my bones. From the depths below rose a column of scarlet mist, coiling upward to brush my face. The scent of iron and incense filled my lungs. I heard whispers layered upon whispers, fragments of prayers spoken backward. My knees weakened. I forced myself onward, eyes fixed on the spire. When we reached the far side, a gateway yawned open, ribs of obsidian folding aside like the petals of some monstrous flower. Inside waited a chamber of blinding gold. The light came not from torches or machinery, but from veins of pure luminescence running through the walls like living arteries. In its center stood a figure. At first I thought it a statue of the Emperor, for it bore the same regal posture, the same crown of radiant fire. But the face was wrong, half serene, half eroded into a skull. Where the eyes should have been burned twin voids that drank the golden light. Around its feet writhed chains of liquid shadow, each link etched with the 8-pointed star. The silent sisters knelt. Their silence deepened until even the pulse of blood in my ears ceased. The figure raised one skeletal hand and pointed directly at me. The mark on my chest ignited, a searing brand that drove me to my knees. The heartbeat of the moon merged with my own, until there was no distinction. A voice filled the chamber, not sound but pure thought, vast and cold as the void. Chosen, witness, return. Each word struck like a hammer, forging something inside me that had not existed a moment before. Visions flared, worlds burning in silent orbit, fleets reduced to drifting bone, the Emperor's throne crumbling beneath a tide of red stars. I saw myself at the center of it, neither savior nor destroyer, but a pivot around which destiny turned. The figure lowered its hand. The visions snapped away, leaving only the echo of inevitability. The silent sisters rose as one. Cyan approached, her visor reflecting the endless black of those void eyes. She pressed a gauntleted finger to the burning sigil on my chest. Instantly the pain ceased, replaced by a cold clarity sharper than any blade. The figure spoke again, a final command that etched itself into the marrow of my soul. Carry the silence. Become the wound. The chamber darkened. The golden veins withdrew, leaving only the dim red glow of the path behind us. The sisters turned without word or gesture and began the return across the black lake. I followed, though the world felt newly hollow, as if the true Kale had been left kneeling at the feet of that impossible throne. Halfway across, the shadows beneath the water rose once more. This time they did not resemble the dead, but myself, hundreds of reflections staring upward, each with the sewn mouth of the mural's crimson woman. Their eyes glowed with the same void that had looked through me. One raised a hand in perfect unison with my own involuntary movement. I stumbled, the glassy path slick beneath my boots. The sisters did not pause. The reflections sank silently back into darkness, leaving only ripples that whispered a single word I could not deny. Return. The heartbeat followed, steady and patient, promising that this descent was only the beginning. The ascent through the moon's hollow veins felt longer than the descent. My vox confirmed nothing, only static threaded with a faint rhythmic thrum that matched the pulse beneath my skin. The silent sisters moved ahead in flawless formation, their null auras bending the corridor's dim light into a slow bleed of shadow. I kept pace, though every breath tasted of iron and ash, as if the cavern itself exhaled the memory of sacrifice. At the halfway mark, the passage widened into a gallery of cracked marble. Statues lined each wall, figures of saints and warriors, but every face had been erased, smoothed to featureless stone. In their place were shallow grooves, filled with dried blood, forming the same 8-pointed pattern that burned on my chest. My hand brushed one groove. It was warm, as if the blood had only just congealed. A low resonance rolled through the chamber, neither sound nor tremor, but a pressure in the skull. The sisters halted. Domina Saan tilted her head, listening to what only she could hear. Then she raised her blade in silent warning. The statues began to move, not with speed, but with a dreadful inevitability, limbs cracking free of stone, dust falling like funerary ash. They stepped from their alcoves, blind heads turning toward us, mouths forming the shape of prayers that produced no sound. Their bodies were pale as bone, yet veins of dark red light pulsed beneath their skin. Saan gave no order. The sisters advanced as one, their execution blades igniting with cold brilliance. The first statue lunged. A sister's strike severed its head, but the torso fought on, arms clawing in erratic spasms. The others joined, a slow tidal advance. I fired in controlled bursts, each round punching through brittle flesh that refused to die. Chunks of marble and sinew scattered across the floor. Still they came. For every fragment destroyed, another statue stirred awake. A sudden hush cut the chaos. The pulse in my chest flared white-hot, forcing me to my knees. The statues froze mid-stride. From the ceiling a single drop of crimson fell, striking the floor with the weight of a thunderbolt. It spread outward in perfect concentric rings, erasing the battle's debris, swallowing sound itself. When the red circle touched my boots, the world shifted. I stood alone on a plain of endless black glass. Above, no stars, only a single wound of light, gold and red, opening wider as I watched. From that wound descended a voice, the same that had marked me in the chamber of gold. You walk the path of the wound. Each step carves the silence deeper. Will you carry it to the end? I tried to speak but found my mouth sewn shut like the mirrored phantoms beneath the lake. Still the answer formed in thought. I have no choice. The wound widened, spilling scarlet fire. Within its heart flickered silhouettes. The silent sisters kneeling, the Emperor's throne fracturing, the galaxy drowning in quiet crimson light. The vision burned into me like scripture. The black plane shattered. I was back in the gallery. The statues lay still, their faces now marked with the sigil that scarred my own chest. The sisters stood untouched, blades lowered. Domina San approached, her visor reflecting the faint red glow that lingered on the walls. She tapped a gauntlet against her gorget, a silent command to continue. We moved on. Behind us, the statues began to hum, a deep, resonant note that vibrated through the marrow. It followed like a heartbeat, slow and patient, promising reunion. Far ahead, a new light bled into the corridor, pale, shifting, neither natural nor mechanical. It pulsed in time with the song of the statues, drawing us forward. I felt the mark on my chest answer with a steady burn, as if recognizing a destination it had known before I was born. The sisters did not look back, and neither did I, though the hum swelled until it became a chorus, a wordless litany that filled the dead air. When we reached the threshold of the next chamber, the light resolved into a vast chasm filled with floating machinery. Cathedral engines suspended in gravity's absence, each adorned with tattered banners of the Imperium. Sparks of crimson lightning leapt between them like veins of living blood. Domina San raised a hand, halting the squad. She turned her visor toward me. Though her face was hidden, I felt the weight of unspoken expectation. The path ahead was mine alone. The hum behind us ceased. In that sudden silence, a single whisper threaded through the vox, cold and absolute. Chosen. Enter. The sisters stepped aside, forming a corridor of flesh and silence. Beyond them the chasm waited, alive with red lightning and the promise of a deeper truth. I crossed the threshold, the mark on my chest blazing like a newborn sun. The chasm breathed like a living thing, each inhalation a slow drag of cold air that carried the scent of rusted incense and scorched circuitry. Machinery hung in weightless suspension, colossal engines and shattered reliquaries, turning in silence. Red lightning leapt from relic to relic, etching fleeting litanies across the dark. I stepped onto a bridge of black iron that formed beneath my boots, as if answering my need. The silent sisters remained at the threshold, their forms still as icons, unwilling or forbidden to follow. Each step forward drew a deeper resonance from the mark burned into my chest. My heartbeat aligned with the chasm's pulse, until I could not tell which belonged to me. Vox static hissed in my ear, then parted to reveal a whisper. Kale. The voice was my own, but stretched and hollow, as though spoken across centuries. A drift of ash floated past, coalescing into the outline of a throne. For a breath it bore the Emperor's shape, radiant and eternal. Then the image shattered into dust, replaced by something formless, an emptiness that mocked the memory of divinity. I reached for my weapon, but the air thickened, freezing the motion mid-gesture. From the far void, a figure approached, walking where no surface existed, cloaked in fragments of scripture and torn banners of 1,000 forgotten crusades. It carried a staff of polished bone tipped with a shard of black sun. Its face was hidden behind a mask of smooth porcelain, featureless save for a single vertical slit glowing faint crimson. When it spoke, the sound bypassed hearing. The wound widens. Each syllable felt carved directly into the marrow. The sisters feed it. You will open it. I forced my mouth to move. Why me? The question emerged as vapor, breaking against the cold. The figure tilted its head. "You were chosen when silence first learned to bleed." Behind me, a metallic groan reverberated through the chasm. I turned. The silent sisters had entered, despite their earlier stillness. They crossed the bridge without footfall, blades unsheathed, their null auras pressing the air flat. Domina San advanced to my side, visor fixed on the masked being. The figure raised its staff. Red lightning arced outward, striking the sisters. Their formation held, but the iron beneath them fractured into a constellation of floating shards. San signaled a quick slash of hand, and the squad scattered across invisible platforms that formed and dissolved with every step. Their movements were impossibly precise, each leap a silent hymn of defiance. The mask turned toward me again. "Do you see how they resist the inevitable? Even silence fights its own birth." I fired a burst into the void where it stood. The rounds slowed, spiraled, and disintegrated before contact. The figure only inclined its head. Noise cannot wound what is not. Cyan lunged, blade a streak of pale light. The staff intercepted, and for an instant the chasm erupted with a sound like the breaking of a star. Then absolute quiet. The two combatants froze, locked in a tableau of motionless fury. Red lightning wrapped them, a crown of living veins. My chest burned hotter. I dropped to one knee, gasping. Visions bled across my sight, the statues in the gallery whispering prayers backward, the lake of black water boiling with faceless reflections, the golden throne collapsing into an ocean of crimson dust. Each image carried the same refrain: open the wound, carry the silence. The figure released the staff. Cyan staggered, but did not fall. It extended a hand toward me, palm up, inviting, "Accept and end the hymn of the galaxy. Refuse, and watch them all sing their last breath." I felt the mark sear deeper, tendrils of light reaching from my chest toward its outstretched hand. My mind split between duty and an aching, inexplicable yearning to step forward. Cyan's voice, first sound I had ever heard from a silent sister, cut through the void, a whisper like a dying star. "Hold." The word shattered the paralysis. I tore myself back, staggering to the bridge's edge. The figure's hand closed on emptiness. It regarded San with something like amusement. One word, and silence dies. The mask cracked, releasing a thin wisp of crimson mist that writhed like a living sigil before vanishing into the chasm. The bridge beneath us convulsed. Lightning intensified, bathing everything in bloodlight. The figure began to dissolve, fragments of scripture peeling away into the void. "We will meet where silence was born," it promised, voice fading into infinite distance. "There the banquet waits." The chasm shuddered once more and stilled. Only the silent sisters remained, their blades dim, their null auras heavy with unseen consequence. Cyan turned to me, vow inches from my face, and though she uttered no sound, I felt the force of a question that had no words. "What did you choose?" I had no answer. The bridge, reformed beneath our feet, pointing toward a distant archway of fractured gold. From beyond it came the faint toll of a bell that should not have existed in this dead moon. Each chime bled into the next, forming a rhythm that matched the burn in my chest. The sisters moved as one toward the sound. I followed, pulse and bell entwined, knowing the banquet promised by the dissolving figure lay ahead, and that some part of me had already taken its seat. The archway of fractured gold exhaled a cold mist that tasted of salt and copper. Beyond it stretched a hall too vast for geometry, its ceiling lost to an abyss of flickering stars that pulsed in slow, mournful rhythm. Columns of black glass rose like frozen lightning, each etched with a scripture I half recognized from the Lectitio Divinitatis, yet every line was reversed as if written for a tongue that prayed backward. The silent sisters entered without pause, their footsteps making no sound. I followed, the mark on my chest beating in time with the distant tolling of the impossible bell. Each chime reverberated through marrow and memory, calling up images I could not own, planets I had never walked, wars I had never fought, faces I somehow mourned. At the hall's center lay a table carved from a single slab of obsidian, so long it seemed to pierce the horizon. Upon it were chalices of living metal, each filled with a fluid blacker than void. Around the table sat figures draped in shadowed robes. I glimpsed the curve of Astartes' armor here, the tattered heraldry of long-dead regiments there, even the mechanized silhouettes of tech priests, whose augmetics whispered Binharic prayers. Every head turned as we approached, yet no faces could be seen. A voice, neither male nor female, drifted from everywhere and nowhere. The banquet begins when silence drinks. Domina-san advanced to the table. She did not kneel. Instead, she drew her blade and set it flat upon the stone. The other sisters mirrored her, forming a ring of cold null around the gathering. The robed figures shifted, their outlines blurring like smoke. One raised a chalice and held it toward me. The black liquid inside moved with the slow elegance of oil, reflecting crimson light that had no source. Chosen of the wound, the voice intoned, "You carry the mark, drink, and the hymn of stars will end." My throat tightened. I felt the memory of thirst, ancient and vast, as though the galaxy itself longed to taste through me. I reached, then froze. The liquid within the cup stirred, forming a mirror of my own face. Its mouth opened, though mine stayed shut, and from it came a whisper only I could hear. "Kale, you have already swallowed more than you know." The silent sisters raised their visors as one. For the first time I saw their eyes, black voids, depthless and infinite. They fixed on me, and the hall darkened until the only light came from the reflection in the chalice. The bell tolled again, deeper, almost breaking the bones of the hall. Cracks spidered across the black glass columns, spilling threads of dull red light that crawled like veins toward the table. The seated figures leaned closer, their forms unraveling into smoke and embers. I forced words past a throat that felt sewn shut. "If I refuse," the answer arrived as 1,000 overlapping voices. "Then the galaxy sings until its throat is ash." The mark on my chest seared. I felt its heat spread along my veins, a tide of molten iron that turned thought to static. The chalice vibrated in the figure's hand, a single drop rising and hanging weightless between us. It pulsed like a heart. Domina-san stepped forward. Her blade hovered above the drop, humming with null energy. Without warning, she sliced through the air. The drop split into countless fragments that froze mid-flight, each one reflecting a different scene of ruin. Planets breaking, fleets burning, stars collapsing into silent red scars. The gathered figures hissed without sound. The hall convulsed, its ceiling of stars spiraling into a whirl of black and crimson. The bell became a roar, and the obsidian table cracked down its center. The voice returned, colder than void. "The wound will open, drink or no. The banquet waits beyond refusal." The fragments of black liquid shot outward, embedding themselves in the sisters' armor, in the columns, in the very air. Each shard burned like a captive star. The mark on my chest echoed their light until my vision blurred. San lowered her blade and met my gaze. Her lips moved in silence, but the words reached me all the same. "Not yet." The hall began to collapse inward, folding like paper into the whirl of stars. The robed figures dissolved into ash that tasted of old blood. The table crumbled, its fragments spinning upward into the void. A sudden gravitational pull seized us. The sisters formed a protective circle, null fields flaring as the floor beneath us gave way. We were drawn toward the swirling darkness where the ceiling had been, the bell's roar now a deafening heartbeat. I felt the chalice's mirror face within me still whispering. Already swallowed. The world inverted. Darkness became downward, and we fell, not through air, but through a silence so dense it ground thought to dust. Somewhere far below, or above, a new sound emerged. A single low chant in a language older than the Imperium, older than stars. It spoke only my name, stretching it until it became the shape of the universe itself. The silent sisters tightened their circle around me as we plunged. The chant grew louder, and with it the burn in my chest flared until it became a second heart. We fell toward a light the color of dying suns. We plunged through a tunnel of dying suns, their light stretching into molten threads that burned without heat. The silent sisters encircled me in perfect formation, their null auras shredding the falling starlight into ribbons of shadow. Gravity lost meaning. Up and down ceased to exist. Only the mark on my chest remained constant, pulsing in time with the deep, unending chant of my name. The descent ended without impact. One moment we were falling. The next we stood upon a plain of black salt that cracked like old bone beneath our boots. Above stretched a sky of endless twilight, lit by a fractured moon whose pieces floated like silent bells. The air was thin and tasted of ozone and rusted blood. A figure awaited us, at the horizon, the masked being from the chasm, its porcelain face now split by a jagged fissure glowing crimson. Fragments of scripture drifted around it like a slow storm, letters burning and reforming in constant prayer. Behind it rose an immense gate of pale stone, carved into the likeness of a mouth sewn shut with chains of living iron. The gate trembled with every beat of the chant, as if something vast strained to speak. Dominus San raised a gauntleted fist. The sisters halted and formed a half-circle, blades drawn. I stepped forward despite the weight of dread pressing on my skull. The masked figure's voice resonated directly within my mind. You have tasted the prelude. The banquet awaits beyond the mouth. The gate shuddered. Chains groaned like dying worlds. From their cracks seeped a mist, the color of old wounds, smelling of incense and wet copper. I demanded words I barely believed were mine. What lies beyond? The end of sound. The first silence. The feast of every voice that ever was. The sisters advanced as one, null fields brightening, until the salt plain quivered. The figure tilted its head. You think you guard him, Domina, but you guard only the inevitable. A sudden wind howled across the plain, though no air stirred. It carried whispers in countless dialects, High Gothic, Low Eldar, Orcish, each pleading for release, each voice ending in the same word, chaos. The mark on my chest seared. I fell to one knee. Images assaulted me. Terror, drowning beneath a tide of crimson quiet. Black ships burning while their human cargo sang in perfect unison. The Astronomicon guttering into darkness. My name threaded through every vision like a command. The gate's chains rattled. One snapped with a soundless flash, flinging molten fragments across the plain. The ground shook as if the planet itself recoiled. The masked figure extended a hand. Open it. Only you may. Domina San moved faster than thought, blade flashing in a silent arc. She struck the figure's arm, cleaving it at the elbow. No blood spilled, only a mist of black stars that swirled and reformed into a new limb. The figure laughed, a vibration that made the salt beneath us writhe. Strike as you will. The wound does not close. More chains burst. The gate mouth gaped wider, revealing a darkness deeper than the void between galaxies. From it came a single tone, neither sound nor silence, but a pressure that collapsed the world into a single moment. I felt my body dissolve into that tone. Memories unraveled, my regiment's oath, the taste of recaf, the warmth of sunlight on Terra. All replaced by a hunger older than the stars. The sisters formed a tight ring around me, null fields blazing like dying suns. Their presence anchored me, though each heartbeat eroded the barrier. San's visor turned toward me, unreadable. In the press of silence, a single thought from her mind reached mine. Chew! The masked figure knelt, head bowed as though before an altar. Every galaxy ends in quiet. Be the knife, Kale. Carve the first cut. The gate's final chain trembled. I rose, compelled by forces beyond will. My hands lifted of their own accord, light spilling from the burning sigil on my chest. The darkness within the gate swelled, eager, infinite. For a heartbeat the silent sisters' null fields flared so brightly the sky fractured, revealing a lattice of stars bleeding red. San stepped close enough that her visor nearly touched mine. Her eyes, still endless voids, locked with my own. You are not the wound, her thought whispered. You are the hand. The words steadied me. I clenched my fists, forcing the mark's light inward. Pain like a collapsing sun erupted through my body. The gate screamed, not with sound but with the absence of it, an annihilating quiet that shook the plain apart. The masked figure staggered, porcelain face cracking into a web of crimson light. This is not refusal, only delay. The banquet waits in every heartbeat, its form dissolved into ash, each fragment carrying a shard of its laughter. The gate slammed shut, chains reknitting themselves with a shriek that felt like rebirth. The twilight sky flickered, then steadied into a deep, blood-hued dusk. The chant of my name faded, leaving only the ragged sound of my own breathing. The sisters lowered their blades. Domina San touched her gauntlet to the scorched mark on my chest. It no longer burned, but it pulsed with a slow, ominous rhythm, like a second heart biding its time. She offered no gesture of triumph, only a silent command to move, far beyond the horizon. A faint bell tolled once more, impossibly distant yet perfectly clear. I turned toward the sound. The banquet, though denied, was not defeated. And I knew with a certainty colder than the void that it had already begun inside me. The bell's echo followed us through the endless dusk, a low vibration that settled into my bones. Each step across the salt plain left no imprint, as if the world had already forgotten us. The silent sisters moved without sound or sign of breath, their null auras pressing back the memories that threatened to bloom behind my eyes. I clutched at the ache in my chest where the mark pulsed, a second heart whispering of feasts not yet served. We reached a ridge of black glass that sliced the horizon. Beyond it sprawled a sea of shattered monuments, titanic statues of forgotten saints toppled like broken teeth, their faces worn smooth by a wind that did not exist. Among the ruins stood a single spire of pale stone, rising higher than any cathedral of terror. Light bled from its seams in thin amber lines, as though the structure itself strained to contain a furnace. Domina San raised a hand and the sisters spread into a protective crescent. Her visor tilted toward me, and though her eyes remained hidden, I felt the weight of her command move forward, but tread as if the ground itself might betray us. The spire's door awaited, a monolith of bronze etched with countless names. I recognized none, yet each cut of the chisel burned into my mind like a half-remembered lullaby. When I reached to touch one, the letters reshaped beneath my fingers into a single word, Kale. The door opened without sound. A current of warm air flowed out, scented of iron and scorched incense. Within lay a hall of mirrors, tall, thin panes that curved like the ribs of a dying leviathan. Each mirror reflected not my face, but a fragment of other lives. A child screaming as a black ship's siren wailed. An inquisitor whispering prayers over a silent battlefield. A world drowning beneath crimson mist, and in every reflection, I stood at the center, my mark blazing like a sun. "You see the feast," a voice murmured. The masked figure emerged from a far mirror, though its porcelain visage now hung in shards, each piece orbiting an emptiness deeper than the void. "You sealed the mouth, but hunger is eternal." The sisters surged forward, their null fields crackled, bending the mirror's surfaces into waves of shadow. Yet the figure's laughter threaded through the air, immune to silence. "Strike me and you strike yourselves. You cannot cage what is absence." I forced words through a throat tight with dread. "Why me?" "Because you listen. Because you dream of an ending no emperor dares name." The mirrors flared with sudden brilliance. I saw terror aflame, the Astronomicon snuffed like a candle. Stars winked out one by one, until only a single point of light remained. The mark on my chest, shining like the last memory of sound. Domina San's thought pierced the rising tide. "Anchor yourself." I gripped the nearest mirror. Frost spread from my palms, spiderwebbing across the glass, until it shattered. The figure's laughter cut off. The hall trembled, shards of reality raining down like frozen rain. The sisters advanced in a perfect ring, their silent discipline a wall against the void. Together we moved toward the spire's heart, where a spiral stair descended into darkness, lit only by the pulse of my mark. Each step downward deepened the resonance in my bones. Whispers crowded the edges of hearing, millions of voices begging for release, promising ecstasy and surrender. I clenched my jaw and kept walking. At the base waited a chamber carved from obsidian. In its center hovered a sphere of pure shadow, edges flickering with faint starlight. It beat like a heart, slow and immense. The masked figure reformed beside it, fragments of porcelain swirling into a mockery of flesh. "Here is the seed of silence, a universe unborn. Take it, Kale, and every cry, every prayer, every scream will end. You will be the last voice, and the first quiet." Domina San raised her blade, null energy rippling like a storm. The sisters followed, their silent presence a cathedral of defiance. I reached toward the sphere, its chill bit to the marrow, and visions cascaded through me, the Emperor upon the golden throne, his eyes opening in sudden relief. Galaxies folding into night without suffering or fear. A peace so total it erased even memory, but beneath that stillness lay an abyss without meaning. No art, no love, no defiance. Only the static of nothing. I drew back. No, the figure shrieked, not with sound but with the collapse of it. Mirrors above the chamber shattered inward, sucking light into the sphere. The sisters formed a living bastion, null auras blazing, until the shadow cracked like glass. Domina Sans stepped forward, pressing her palm to the sphere. Light erupted, searing white, and the chamber dissolved in a wave of silence so profound it became a roar. When the brilliance faded, the sphere was gone. The masked figure lay as drifting ash. The hall of mirrors had become a corridor of plain stone, unremarkable and finite. My mark no longer burned, but a faint rhythm lingered, a heartbeat not my own, echoing through the universe like a promise unkept. The sisters regarded me in wordless unanimity. Domina San inclined her head once, an acknowledgement not of victory but of delay. Above us, the bell tolled again, soft, patient, inevitable. The bell's toll bled into every breath, neither near nor far, a vibration older than the moons that crumbled beneath it. We emerged from the spire into a sky awash with rust-red clouds. Lightning flickered in spirals, soundless, like the heartbeat of a dying star. The silent sisters fanned around me, their null auras thinning the air until each inhale scraped like broken glass. My chest still carried the faint echo of the sphere's rhythm, a ghostly counterpoint to the toll above. Ahead stretched a causeway of black basalt suspended over nothing. No horizon, no depth, only an infinite descent into darkness that felt alive. Each slab of stone bore sigils half erased by time, glowing dimly as we stepped across. With every pace the bell grew clearer, its chime a slow command to surrender. Halfway across, the void stirred. Pale figures rose from the abyss, silhouettes of those we had slain. The statues, the mirrored phantoms, the mask that promised silence. Their faces were blank, but their gestures pleaded, hands outstretched, palms upward, as if begging me to leap and join their rest. The sisters did not falter, their presence gnawed the apparitions into vapor, yet each wisp reformed behind us, a trail of memory unwilling to fade. The causeway ended at a gate of living metal. Veins of molten gold pulsed through black iron, breathing like a vast lung. I touched the surface and felt it recoil, then open with a sigh that carried the scent of ozone and ancient dust. Inside lay a cathedral of void light. Columns of shadow arched into a ceiling of shifting constellations, stars forming and dying in seconds. At the center stood a throne of fractured crystal, upon which sat a figure robed in tatters of night. Its face was my own. The doppelganger rose. You refused the seed, yet still you carry the wound. Its voice was a harmony of all who had spoken to me since the first bell. Do you believe choice absolves you? I believe it defines me, I said, though doubt quivered behind the words. It circled slowly, feet not touching the floor. Then define yourself. Speak the ending. Images flared in the cathedral sky, terror aflame, the golden throne collapsing, the Astronomicon darkening. Then other visions, worlds healing, people laughing beneath unbroken suns, the warp stilled into quiet peace. Both futures bled together until I could not tell salvation from ruin. Domina San stepped forward, blade drawn, but the double's gaze froze her mid-stride. The other sisters likewise halted, trapped in a silence deeper than their own. The figure extended a hand. One word, KL, name the fate of all. The mark on my chest burned white. I tasted blood and ash. My mind reached for a single syllable, any sound to shatter the stalemate. Instead I exhaled nothing, a breath that contained every refusal, every defiance I had left. The double tilted its head, and for an instant sorrow softened its features. So be it. The cathedral convulsed. Stars rained like molten glass. The throne split apart, shards spiraling upward into a maelstrom of black and gold. The figure dissolved into a storm of light that rushed into me, filling every vein with fire. I fell to my knees. The bell struck once more, louder than worlds breaking. The sisters were free again, their presence anchoring the collapsing void. Domina San lifted me by the arm without a word. When the light faded, we stood on lunar rock beneath a silent sky. No spire, no causeway, only the scarred surface of Luna stretching to a cold horizon. Earth hung above, brilliant, wounded, eternal. The mark on my chest had become a faint scar, pulsing only with my own heartbeat. Yet somewhere beyond sense the bell lingered, patient as gravity. The sisters formed a circle, their null auras merging into a single calm. Domina San inclined her head once, a gesture of conclusion or perhaps warning. I looked to the distant blue planet and wondered if my silence had saved it, or merely delayed an end that cannot be named. The sky offered no answer. The silence after the bell was not absence, but pressure, a weight that bent the air until every breath trembled. We descended through a fissure in Luna's crust, a tunnel that had not existed when we first arrived. The silent sisters moved as one, their null auras knitting a corridor through the shifting stone. My boots scraped over dust that glittered like ground glass, each step stirring faint motes of crimson light. The passage narrowed and twisted, smelling of ozone and cold iron. My vox emitted a single burst of static, a soundless scream that lingered in the bones. I cut the channel, but the echo remained inside my skull, a vibration that matched the fading memory of the lunar bell. We emerged into a cavern vast as a forgotten sea. Black pillars rose from a floor of cracked crystal, and at the center stood a monolith of translucent flesh, veins pulsing with dull gold. Shapes moved within it, distorted reflections of the sisters, of me, of strangers I half remembered from battles long ended. Their faces rippled as if pressed against a membrane too thin to hold them. Domina San approached first, blade drawn. The monolith responded with a low resonance that stirred the dust into spirals. Words formed in the vibration, ancient High Gothic wrapped in Benharic cadence. The wound is open, the wound must feed. The sisters fanned around the base, each placing a gauntleted hand against the living surface. Their silence deepened, a null choir suffocating the cavern's hum. My chest burned where the scar pulsed. The monolith quivered, and the faces inside turned toward me as one. A fissure split the crystal floor, releasing a breath of heat and copper. From the crack rose a column of scarlet mist, coiling like a serpent. It hovered before me, shifting into the shape of a figure cloaked in shadow. No eyes, no mouth, only the void where features should be. It spoke without sound. You carry the bell. Strike or be struck. The scar on my chest ignited. I felt the rhythm of the bell within my bones, waiting for a command. Around me the sisters stood frozen, their forms blurred by the mist. The cavern darkened until only the monolith glowed, veins of gold throbbing with a heartbeat that matched my own. I raised my hand. The mist mirrored the motion, a perfect reflection. For an instant I saw every path to strike and end the resonance, to lower my hand and let the wound devour worlds. Choice collapsed into inevitability. I pressed my palm to the monolith. A detonation of light ripped through the chamber. Neither heat nor flame, but pure sensation. My mind flooded with visions. Terra's throne fracturing, the Astronomican's beam flickering like a dying candle, fleets adrift in blind war. Among them I saw the sisters kneeling, their silence cracking into screams that no one could hear. The mist surged into me, cold as the void between stars. My breath seized, my pulse matched the bell's inexorable toll. The monolith split open, revealing an inner core of swirling darkness. From that darkness emerged a soundless chime so deep it bent the crystal pillars inward. Domina San's hand closed on my shoulder, dragging me back. The cavern shuddered, fissures racing across the walls. Fragments of golden crystal rained down like frozen blood. The shadow figure dissolved into 1,000 shards of red light that swirled upward and vanished through the fissure in the ceiling. The monolith's glow dimmed, leaving only the echo of its last word, feed. We retreated as the chamber collapsed, the path behind us sealing with molten stone. The sisters moved swiftly, their null auras flickering as if strained. My scar throbbed in time with the departing bell, a rhythm now buried beneath layers of lunar rock, but far from gone. When we reached the surface, the stars above seemed closer, sharper, as though the void itself leaned down to listen. Earth hung on the horizon, serene and fragile. Yet beneath its calm I felt the pull of that final chime, a summons that promised the wound had only begun to bleed. Domina San met my gaze, her expression unreadable behind the mask. She inclined her head a fraction, a gesture of both warning and acknowledgement. The mission was not over. The true descent had only just begun. Somewhere deep below, the bell prepared to strike again. The void above Terra shimmered like heated metal as our transport pierced the atmosphere. The sisters had spoken no word since Luna, their silence a living thing that pressed against my thoughts. My scar pulsed with each heartbeat, a hidden metronome counting down to something unseen. I tried to pray, but every litany tasted of iron and ash. We descended toward the ecclesiarchal spire, a dagger of black marble thrust into the storm-racked sky. Lightning licked its edges in perfect rhythm with the scar's throb. Pilots recited the Emperor's creed in trembling voices. As we approached the landing platform, none dared glance at the silent sisters who sat like statues around me, their null fields stripping the cabin of warmth. The spire's halls reeked of incense and ozone. Servitors lined the nave, faces locked in silent scream, optic lenses following our every step. A trail of crimson dust marked the floor as though someone had walked before us, bleeding a path. The sisters fanned into a defensive circle. I followed, each step echoing too loudly. The sound swallowed a heartbeat later. We reached the inner sanctum, its massive doors etched with the Emperor's sigil. The metal was warm, pulsing faintly like living flesh. Domina San placed her palm against it. The doors yielded with a sigh that smelled of burned roses. Inside stretched a cathedral of shifting shadow. Columns melted into mist, reforming into shapes half-remembered. My first command squad, the dead of countless campaigns, the twin void eyes of the lunar apparition. At the center rose a dais of black glass. Upon it rested a sphere of translucent crystal, veins of gold swirling like captured lightning. The scar seared. The sphere pulsed in perfect time with it, calling without sound. Domina San motioned forward. I stepped onto the dais. The crystal brightened, revealing within a lattice of red threads. Each thread a world, each world quivering as if sensing my presence. The voices of the dead filled the chamber, layered and discordant. The wound must feed. The wound must feed. My knees buckled. I saw visions unfurl behind my eyes. Hive cities drowning in silent crimson tides. Astartes falling mute mid-battle. The Astronomican's beacon flickering into darkness. Each image carried the same rhythm, a bell that now beat with my heart. I touched the sphere. A jolt like cold fire coursed through me. The cathedral fell away. I stood upon a plain of endless night beneath a sky of bleeding stars. The lunar figure awaited, its void eyes blazing. You have carried the bell to the heart. Will you sound it? Behind me the sisters appeared, statues of defiance. Their null auras dulled the bleeding sky, but even they trembled as the figure's presence pressed down. I will not, I whispered, though my scar burned with betrayal. The figure tilted its head, sadness woven through the void. Then witness, the stars collapsed inward. A roar like the birth of galaxies filled the dark. I saw Terra crumble, its oceans boiling away, its hives sinking into a scarlet core, fleets scattered, warp storms bloomed. In every fragment of ruin, the bell rang, a single note that silenced all prayers. The vision shattered. I was back in the sanctum, hand still upon the sphere. Domina San's blade was at my throat, her eyes unreadable through the helm, locked on mine. The sisters stood poised, their silence a weapon drawn tight. The sphere pulsed once more and went dark. The voices ceased. Only my heartbeat remained, a solitary toll in the cavernous hall. San lowered her blade, but did not step back. She pressed 2 fingers to the scar on my chest. The burning stopped, replaced by a cold that reached the marrow. Containment, her gesture seemed to say. though no sound passed her lips. Outside, the storm intensified, lightning striking in the cadence of a distant bell. I knew the sound was not in the sky but in me, waiting for a moment when silence would no longer hold. The sisters turned as one and began the long walk back to the landing platform. I followed, the weight of the sphere's unspoken command heavy in my veins. Above, the thunder shaped itself into a single wordless summons, patient and absolute. The wound was not closed. It had only found a home. The journey from Terra to the watch station above Saturn was a blur of silence and starlight. No vox traffic, no engine hymn, only the low hum of the Geller field as the warp pressed against our hull. The silent sisters sat motionless, their null auras knitting an island of thoughtless calm. I felt the scar on my chest beat in time with the ship's reactor, each pulse a quiet reminder that the bell had not finished its work. When we emerged into real space, the station awaited an abandoned ring of iron and crystal suspended above the pale bands of the gas giant. Automated signals still blinked across its hull, a code I almost recognized from old Navy archives but twisted, backward, each interval a fraction too long. The sisters disembarked without order or prayer, their boots striking the metal with surgical rhythm. I followed, vox inactive, heart keeping that impossible tempo. Inside, corridors stretched like veins, walls slick with condensation that smelled faintly of ozone and dried blood. Our lights revealed inscriptions etched deep into the bulkheads, fragments of high Gothic liturgies spliced with binaric equations. Each line ended in the same glyph, the 8-pointed star bound in a circle of thorns. A sudden vibration coursed through the deck, not mechanical but organic, as though the station exhaled. From hidden vents poured a thin crimson mist. My scar flared, the sisters tightened formation, their silence compressing the air, until the mist recoiled. Yet whispers threaded through the voxless chamber, soft as breath. The wound remembered. We reached a central hub where a vast viewport revealed Saturn's storms swirling like liquid marble. Hanging before the glass floated a sphere identical to the one in Terra's sanctum, but fractured, its golden veins leaking threads of scarlet light. Around it drifted fragments of bone and rusted metal, orbiting in perfect silence. Domina Scion approached. The sphere brightened, shards knitting together as if scenting prey. My scar burned white hot. I stepped forward despite myself. The sisters raised their blades but did not strike, their null fields shivering as the sphere's glow pushed against them. Visions pierced me without warning, fleets swallowed by warp tides, entire sectors ringing with a soundless chime. I saw my own reflection on the viewport, mouth sewn shut, like the mural's crimson woman, eyes alight with void fire. Behind that reflection another figure emerged, my double from the lunar cathedral, its gaze patient and absolute. You carry the seed across the stars. It spoke inside my skull, every step a note, every breath a toll. I refuse, I whispered, though no sound left my lips. The double raised a hand. The fractured sphere spun faster, crimson light flaring until the hub drowned in scarlet. Metal screamed, not from stress but from resonance, each rivet vibrating with the bell's cadence. The sisters staggered, their null fields cracking like glass. Domina Scion thrust her blade into the sphere. A shockwave burst outward, cold, weightless, endless. I felt the wound in my chest expand, a black sun devouring breath and thought. For an instant the station, Saturn, even the stars fell away. Only the bell remained, immense and patient. Then silence slammed back. The sphere lay dormant, Scion's blade buried to the hilt. The mist dissipated in a single sigh. The sisters straightened, though their armor trembled with a faint metallic hiss. My scar no longer burned, it pulsed softly, as if satisfied. San retrieved her weapon and looked to me. No words passed, but her eyes behind the visor held a question that even she dared not voice. I had no answer. I only felt the quiet certainty that the bell's music now lived within the void between heartbeats, unreachable yet inescapable. Through the viewport Saturn's storm slowed, forming a spiral that mirrored the 8-pointed glyph. A final tremor rippled through the deck, a single heartbeat of the endless wound. Somewhere beyond Saturn's cold rings, I sensed the next note gathering, patient as the dark. The return to Sol was a voyage without time. The warp bled into every corridor of the ship, turning steel into soft shadow. No alarms sounded, yet I felt the hull quiver as if something vast pressed a hand against it from the outside. The silent sisters formed a constant vigil around me, their null auras the only barrier between thought and the endless murmur of the bell. My scar no longer burned. It throbbed with quiet purpose, as if counting the distance to an unseen end. When we breached real space, terror filled the viewport like a dying sun. The planet's storms coiled in unnatural symmetry, cloud bands spiraling into a shape I recognized, the 8-pointed glyph I had carried across stars. Even the Astronukan's beacon flickered, a heartbeat out of rhythm. The sisters guided me toward the Sanctum Bellis, a fortress monastery hidden within the Himalaya. Snow swept the landing platform, each flake glowing faintly crimson before melting on the stone. Inside, the halls were empty. No acolytes, no priests, only the scent of incense burned to ash. The walls vibrated with a low frequency that matched the pulse of my scar. At the heart of the sanctum we found the Bellis Major, the Emperor's oldest relic bell, forged before the heresy, and rung only to herald the end of ages. It hung silent, a mountain of black iron veined with gold, suspended by chains as thick as starship hull plating. Yet it moved with a slow sway, stirred by no wind. Domina-san advanced first, her blade held low. The other sisters formed a circle, their null fields overlapping in a lattice of stillness. I stepped closer, the scar guiding me as if magnetized. The bell's surface shimmered, reflecting not our shapes but scenes of ruin. Luna's collapsing spire, Saturn's spiraling storms, the fractured sphere. Each image pulsed in time with the silent chime I felt in my marrow. A voice rolled through the chamber, deep as planetary gravity. The wound has crossed the void. Sound the ending. The bell began to hum, a vibration that loosened frost from the vaulted ceiling. Dust rained in slow arcs, each mote catching an unseen light. My scar flared brighter than ever, searing through armor and flesh. I staggered forward until my palm rested against the iron. It was cold and warm at once, a contradiction that swallowed thought. Visions poured in. Every battle I had fought replayed in red and gold, but each victory led to silence. Armies halted mid-stride, worlds darkening, stars flickering out like dying candles. Behind it all, the bell tolled, vast and patient. Domina-san seized my shoulder, but her strength faltered. The bell's resonance cracked her visor, a thin line of glass spidering outward. The other sisters braced themselves, their null fields straining, their silence no longer absolute. I heard the double's voice, the one from the lunar cathedral, layered now with countless echoes. One strike ends the song, one strike begins it. Chew. I felt the scar open, not bleeding but expanding into a void that touched every cell. My hand clenched. I imagined the bell ringing, its sound devouring galaxies. I imagined turning away, letting it rust in eternal quiet. Neither vision promised mercy. The sisters chanted without words, their minds pressing a final plea into the air. Containment, refusal, survival. I drew back my hand. The hum deepened until the floor trembled. Chains groaned like dying titans. For an instant I believed I could resist. Then the bell moved on its own. A single perfect toll erupted, sound and silence combined, a note beyond measure. The sanctum shook as if the mountain itself had been struck. Dust fell in rivers, and the air turned scarlet. My scar blazed white, then vanished, leaving only emptiness. The sisters collapsed to one knee, null auras flickering like extinguished candles. Domina-san's eyes met mine, wide with something I had never seen in her. Above us the bell swung once more, and though no audible sound followed, the vibration reached far beyond terror. I felt it surge through the warp into every system I had ever known. A summons older than stars. The wound was no longer within me. It had become the galaxy's own heartbeat. The echo of the bell never ceased. Even as the Sanctum Bellis stood still, the vibration persisted in the marrow of the universe. Terra's sky darkened to a bruised violet, stars visible at noon, their light bending inward as if drawn by a hidden tide. The sisters carried me from the chamber. but I felt no weight in my body, only the endless resonance threading every thought. Outside, the Himalaya trembled. Avalanches poured like rivers of powdered bone, carving new scars across the mountains. Pilgrims scattered below, their prayers drowned by a silence so deep it devoured sound itself. Ships in high orbit reported instruments failing, augurs blinded by a single harmonic frequency. The Astronomicon pulsed once, twice, and then steadied into a rhythm that matched the bell's tolls, steady, patient, inevitable. Domina Siren's voice broke the quiet. "You have bound it to the stars," she said, her words edged with awe and accusation. "What happens now?" I tried to answer, but my tongue found only vibration, each syllable disintegrated before forming, replaced by the low note of creation's end. Sanna's eyes narrowed. She touched my arm, and the null field around her flared. For a heartbeat the resonance dimmed, enough for a whisper to escape my lips. "It waits," I said. "It waits for choice." We descended the mountain under a sky that bled constellations. Cities below burned with sudden light, as power grids failed and reawakened in erratic pulses. Vox traffic became a single chant repeated across every channel. One strike ends the song. One strike begins it. No source, no origin. Only the words traveling faster than any signal should. At the Imperial Palace, the Eternity Gates stood open, its custodians kneeling as if compelled by a presence beyond command. I crossed the threshold and felt the bell's call deepen. Each step through the Hall of Leng carved an after-image of starlit ruin behind my eyes. Statues of long-dead heroes cracked along their seams, dust spilling like sand through an hourglass. The golden throne awaited in its cavern of gold and decay. The Emperor's withered form shone dimly beneath the arcane machinery. Eyes closed, a corpse sustained by myth, but the resonance reached even him. His gaunt face shifted imperceptibly, lips trembling as if to speak. A thought entered me, colder than the void. The toll is mine and yours. Ring it to awaken. Refuse it to preserve the lie. I approached the throne. Around us, custodians knelt, their armor dimmed. Time stretched thin as parchment. My scar now a hollow absence, aligned with the Emperor's silent heart. For an instant I felt the weight of every age. The conquests, the betrayals, the endless wars fought to keep the galaxy from collapsing into nightmare. All of it balanced on the edge of a single sound. I raised my hand. A phantom bell materialized in the air, a perfect twin to the one beneath the Himalaya. Its surface mirrored the void between galaxies, its rim glowing with the faint red of a dying star. Domina Siren appeared beside me, her blade unsheathed but lowered. "If you strike," she whispered, "there is no going back." I looked at the Emperor, but he gave no sign, only the faintest exhale, like the sigh of a sleeping god. The chant swelled from every corner of the palace, every city, every world. One strike ends the song, one strike begins it. I let the bell's mallet, formed of thought and memory, hover above the rim. My heartbeat matched the universe's final cadence. Endings and beginnings became indistinguishable. I brought it down. A sound beyond sound erupted, folding the galaxy inward. Stars screamed in sudden birth and instant death. Time convulsed, rewriting itself as light and shadow exchanged places. Terror vanished in radiance, not destruction but transformation, a single flare of infinite possibility. When the brilliance subsided, I stood alone in a silence that was not empty but complete. The Emperor's throne was gone, the palace dissolved into a plain of silver ash, stretching beneath an endless dawn. I felt neither triumph nor despair, only the steady rhythm of a new cosmos awakening. The bell's toll had ended one song and begun another, and I, its final witness, walked forward into the soundless light.